Hello, welcome to the Essence of Tea podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Jie, and today we're going to be talking about the stories and the history and culture of tea and how it makes up cultural identity. So I have a special guest today, and I'll be bringing her on right now. Welcome, Juno Kim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Drinking tea.
Yep, me too. Drinking some tea. What kind are you having today?
This is ginseng oolong tea.
Oh, that's a good one. Is it one that you got at our shop when you're
No,
visiting?
the one that I got at your shop was ran out because I drank them all. So there's my little ginseng oolong tea right here.
Oh,
Sipping
nice.
in. Yeah.
Mhm. So I met Juno Kim in our tea shop in Fairbanks, Alaska. So for those of you listening from around the world, our tea company is based in Fairbanks, Alaska, and Juno is not originally from Alaska, but she was in Fairbanks traveling, taking photographs, doing some social media work, and she was referred to our shop as a person who's like really into tea, right? So Juno,
Yeah.
tell them how you found out about us.
So I was there for a little campaign to highlight Fairbanks as a destination and some small businesses and interesting places, basically. Because, Fairbanks is, some people think it's scary because it's cold, but we're up there to, highlight the destination. And then my contact, she saw me drinking tea, and then we got to talk, and she's like, "Oh, if you like tea, like you have to meet Jenny. You have to go to her shop." So she's like, "Yeah, she's this like awesome lady who wrote a book, and she told me all about you." So I didn't expect to see you there because it was so late, and then I saw the shop was open after dinner. Like, oh, we'll just go in and check out the shop, and then you were there. So it was great. And then I think we spent like maybe half an hour or more at your shop talking about different things.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. When we start talking about tea, any of our customers or guests that we love to welcome, it's so easy that time flies because you
Mhm.
instantly have a connection in the hobby or the interest in tea or the tea history, culture, health benefits, and such. Oh, I'm going to say hello really quickly. Hey, Sherry, watching on Facebook, and Joanne, hello, welcome. Let us know where you're watching from. Juno, where are you streaming in from today?
Anchorage today.
Anchorage.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch them.
Sorry, my phone is talking. So, yeah, well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule because I've been seeing all of your pictures and your social media posts and all your travel. So, do you want to tell everybody what you do?
So I have a long history of destination marketing. So long time ago, I started the career as a travel blogger. So that got me to travel around the world, and we got to make me. So I basically worked online and traveled for a long time. So did it for 7 years full time. So didn't have a home, or I visited home in Korea and stayed here and there, but so basically just kind of nonstop. And then that grew into destination marketing, and I'm also a photographer, so that kind of got me together. And after we moved to Alaska, I worked at a local tourism bureau for a few years. And then recently started my own consulting company to do marketing and media and content work. So combined with my travel blog, which is on Runaway Juno, so we're doing a lot of promotion and different type of content work for a lot of different clients in Alaska and outside of Alaska too.
Oh, wow, so fascinating. So, you and I like met, and I was like, oh, it's so fascinating because I'm Asian, I'm Chinese, and you're Korean, and then you're like, oh yeah, because I grew up drinking tea, and I'm like, I didn't grow up drinking tea, even though the highest population of people on this planet are Asians, whether it's like Indian, Chinese, Korean, like that makeup of Asians, and then
Mm-hmm.
like most of these Asian countries are who produce most of the tea plants. So I kind of grew up from a different perspective, being first generation American, growing up in Alaska, and you didn't grow up in Alaska. Do you want to tell a little bit about like your cultural history and how it's related to tea and what your upbringing was like?
So I was born and raised in Korea. So I never really lived outside before I start traveling. But so in Korea, when we say we drink water, it means some sort of a tea. So growing up, we couldn't drink the tap water like you do in America. Like we couldn't drink it because it wasn't a good quality water. So we always had to boil the water. So we always had this big pot or kettle or something. And my mom would always boil the water and then we'll put something in it to make taste better. So like dried barley, dried caraway seed is very common, dried corn, and also dried mushrooms, dried like all sorts of different vegetables, like a radish, or some sort of different type of herbs or something. So we'll always have that, and we will chill that in the fridge to drink it like a water. So when we said water, there was always a tea. But to me, that's a water. Like just tap water is a clear water to me. So that's how we kind of differentiate. But we never think that we were drinking tea because there was a water. But now I drink those as a tea. So, and also we grow green tea in our country, in the south side of the country, because our country is a long peninsula. So green tea was always served to a guest. So whenever somebody comes to the house, you make them like a hot beverage, so it's like either green tea or some sort of hot water we just made, or so green tea was really common, and green tea mixed with the brown rice is very common. So it was always around. So that's how I kind of grew up, and like drinking hot beverage is very important in my culture, as you know, same in Chinese too, just drinking hot beverage. And then how did I really get into tea as a tea now is so I went to New Zealand, and that was my first country that I ever visited. And I was 21 or 22. So I went to New Zealand for backpacking, and I was alone. And I was there for a month, and I got to meet this family that this is a kind of long story, but I was kind of lost, and they kind of rescued me, and I barely spoke English, and they were like, oh, come with me and, stay in my house. So I went to their house, and they was one of those people that always open the door, and then people come in and out of their house and just kind of visit. And they always had tea station, and they drink a lot of black tea. So their brand of tea was a PG Tips. That's always, they had a big box of it in the counter. So whoever somebody comes in the house, and they just boil water and make the tea. And because New Zealand has like the best dairy, right? So they have always had milk. So that PG Tips mixed with milk, that became the tea for me. And that's how, like, oh, so this is a beverage you drink. So we would drink it every day, like 3-5 times a day, like every day.
Like water. Like
yeah, just like somebody comes to the house, boil the water, make the tea. Oh, somebody comes in the house, boil the water, make the tea. Like repeat every day. And that kind of became the habit, and like, oh, this is like a tea culture. And because New Zealand kind of has this background in the English culture too, so they drink a lot of black tea and with milk. And so after I came back from New Zealand, I kind of sought out like a black tea, like, oh, so I like this taste of this tea and milk. And in Korea at the time, there was not a lot of black tea around. So black tea was maybe Lipton or just a very small amount. And so I kind of like got very interested in tea. And then because in Korea, we have a lot of those herbal teas or green tea, but I was also interested in different type of like black tea, because there's like a blended tea like you have in your store. So I got to know this tea group when I was in school, in college and grad school, in an online group. There's the people who love tea. And so I got to know different brand, like a Twinings tea brand in England, and, like all this different like Yorkshire teas or, whatever different kind of tea. And then they were ordering it from England as a group. and then you kind of buy from them. You kind of divide the shipping fee and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I participated in that a few times. So I got to know Earl Grey tea because of that. And then there's a Lady Grey in Twinings. And there's like all sorts of different blended tea and different brands. And so I got very into that. So I was in grad school and I always had a little tea station on my desk with the little kettles and all this stuff. So yeah, it was always kind of became a part of me. And then when I started traveling, it kind of gradually into like, it's interesting to go to a place has tea because, there wasn't like a sole purpose of traveling, but because of that's a part of interest. So especially when we went to China, tea heaven, right? In China, just the best tea, and at the time I didn't really know a lot about tea other than what I knew. But tea is kind of like wine or cheese, as you learn, there's so much more to learn. Like when I met you, I met a lot of people who knows a lot about tea, but like she knows about tea. Like Jenny, like she knows about tea. And I know a little bit about it too, but I know very little. It's not professional knowledge at all. But when I was in China, my dad is also very into green tea. And then, he has this little stash of nice quality teas. He always has it around the house. And then one of it was pu'er tea that he always considered like the best quality tea. So he would only drink it. He would drink it when he go to like hiking. So he would always brew before he go in the house and put it in the thermos, and he would drink it in the mountain. That was a pu'er tea for him. So I knew about it, and then knew about the cake and stuff. So when we were in China, like necessary steps. So we went to Yunnan. That's where the pu'er tea came from.
Yeah, the birthplace of tea.
Yeah. So so me and my husband, we went to tea shop after tea shop after tea shop because we learned like, they do tasting. So we had different kind of tasting, learn about pu'er tea I have very limited knowledge in Chinese language. I can like read the letters and stuff like that. So we would just basically show up and I would like read a little bit and like, this looks interesting. So we had a little tasting, and they have this gadget of boiling tea in the water with the different temperatures, like 75, 85, or 95. So that, and with the whole tasting. And in China also, there's a lot of tea shops, right? So you just kind of tea house, that's what they call. So you kind of go and sit down and have a big jug of tea and like look at the scenery or play dominoes or something. And
mahjong, dominoes, cards.
Yeah. So we did a lot of that too, like traveling around the Yunnan province and the Sichuan province. That just we go to any tea house and kind of the same thing. I look out the river and drinking tea and chrysanthemum tea with so did a lot of that. And then everywhere we went, went to Nepal, and they have really nice herbal tea from the Himalayas. And so that because we're always drinking tea, it's not the purpose of the travel, but it always became a big part of the travel.
Interesting.
And that's led to you on Fairbanks, the same thing. Who would think that there's a really high quality tea shop in Fairbanks, Alaska? It's kind of random, So that's kind of, that's how, you connect with the people, you connect with the different people with a different background, but you kind of connect with the same interest,
What is your most favorite story of tea? Like all of your travels. I know you've been to Nepal, you've been to Mongolia, you've been to, New Zealand. What is your favorite story or a moment or a memory you've had around tea? Maybe the point wasn't tea, but it ended up being that. Like, what is your most memorable experience with tea?
There's a lot, like the New Zealand story. That's a very distinct moment to me because there was introduction to a different culture, because New Zealand is very Western culture and very different than any Americans or Europeans. They're very different. So that became a very big part of me. Recently, it wasn't many years ago, maybe 3 years ago, before just before we moved here, we were in Central Asia. So Kyrgyzstan remained one of my favorite countries that I've been to. In that, I think it's a very general Central Asian culture that I haven't been to many places in Central Asia, but my husband spent a lot of time on Central Asia. He lived in Uzbekistan and stuff like that. So when we were traveling, you would go stay in somebody's yurt. Like you go middle of the mountain because they're still nomadic people. So in the summertime, they all go into mountain to set up a yurt. Wintertime, they all come down to the city. But in summer, they all set up this yurt, and travelers go in and basically eat food and stay at their yurts. It's a separate yurt, but you would be invited into the host yurt to eat and drink with them. So that's one of the things, the same thing as what happened in New Zealand. Like anybody comes, they just go in and they just pour you some tea. It comes out of this. It's not like it's not like a high quality tea that, they're sharing, but this is like their general hot beverage because even in the mountains it's cold in the summertime. So they boil the water and then, they use the same tea over and over and over again. It's a little black tea, loose tea. And they would just have a, very specific this shape of teacup, and they would pour it like a little bit less than half, and like over and over and over, And then we can't talk because I don't speak Russian or the Kyrgyz language, and then they don't maybe speak Russian, but they may speak Kyrgyz language, but I don't speak Kyrgyz language, so we can't talk about anything. But we just kind of sit around, like, enjoy the quietness and being in the mountain, drink the tea, and they always have little snacks and stuff, like little sweets around the table. That's kind of pastime,
Yeah, it's because what you're saying is very fascinating because of the hospitality of tea. Like you're in tourism right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you're helping companies with tourism, travel destinations. And
Right.
there are people who travel around the world, whether solo or in groups, who do not speak the other language. But what you're telling me is all these different places, even the places you didn't speak the language, like China. I mean, you're lucky enough that you can make out some of the characters, but I can't even make out the characters. I'm like trying to listen because I speak Cantonese and not mainland Mandarin. So I'm like, okay, what are they saying? It kind of sounds like this. I can't even read this stuff. So half the time I'm just trying to speak in Cantonese and hoping that they guess what I'm trying to say back. So it's kind of funny because I'm a Chinese person in China and I don't speak Chinese, But our connection is tea. And sometimes those special moments, like your memory in the yurt up in the mountains, you don't even need language.
Yeah.
You have a deeper connection of this sharing of community, hospitality, ritual, and culture that goes back thousands of years, hundreds of generations. And that's what makes tea incredibly powerful because no matter where you go, even if you went to the UK, even if you went to Russia, they're going to have some sort of tea. I mean, when you're saying like we grew up like steeping all these different herbs, like it wasn't even green tea, but it was like, some roots. I was telling your husband, I'm like, oh yeah, the Phoenix oolong's pretty good. It tastes like, like lotus seed. Have you had lotus seed soup? And he's like, I don't know. Have I had them? Like, little white little seed things. And they make soup out of them and taste like vegetable soup. So all these different cultures, they don't even necessarily use the tea plant to infuse in hot water. And even when you think of places like Norway or Scandinavian countries, they might drink tea or they might even drink coffee, which is the same kind of ritual of infusing something in hot water.
Right.
And then sitting there enjoying the scenery, like, what are you gonna say? It's kind of awkward silence. But after a while, it's not really awkward anymore. It's like this, like, I don't want to say it's like a spiritual connection, but it's being present in the moments and allowing it to happen. Instead of going, well, thank you. Okay, I guess I'm gonna go because I don't know what to say to you. you don't even need to say anything.
Right. Just sit around and, just be there.
Mhm.
And I like about those different customs too, that I learned that in Central Asia, it's like a wide mouth cup, and they don't ever pour you more than half, because it means, it kind of indicates that, I don't want to pour you more tea after this. So they would always pour really little bit. So when you drink it, they pour it again. Drink it, they pour it again. They always do that. So like a serving as a hostess. But in my culture, if you pour anything, it's kind of accustomed to pour it almost to the top, because that kind of shows your respect, and the generosity. So when
like abundance versus like if you gave me half a cup of, it's like the perceived value of like abundance versus what they value in those countries that poured you half a cup was the time spent. Like, oh, you can't leave. I gotta put some more. Don't leave. I gotta put some more in there. Like, I'm helping you. Like, it just shows like what their value is. Not that they value one is greater than the other, but it's a mindset of cultural values of we want to make sure that you don't feel without, for yours. That's what's a full cup. And the other one is like, we want to make sure we're here for you. Don't leave. Like, we welcome you. You can stay as long as you want. Even for the host, and you might have experienced this too, if you've ever hosted any people from different cultures, but sometimes it's like, for you, you're like, oh my goodness, it's like 2 a.m. and they're still here. You're like, okay, keep pouring the tea. I guess they're not leaving. I mean, I've hosted people or like couch surfers at my house or something like that who like don't speak a lick of English. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm not worried about them like stealing from me or anything like that, but I want to be there because it's a moment of time that I am privileged with this opportunity, even if I have no idea what's going on. We're just observing. And it's very interesting that type of community is so important for like our mental health, our livelihood, and our personal development.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And this the scent is very strong, identity and memory too, So when you smell something, like, oh, it reminds you of something or somebody, like you smell of this very strong chai tea, and like you think of India, like, oh yeah, the trains in India, they come by with this little cup of chai. If I have
clay cups. Did you get a clay cup?
Yeah. And then you drink it and then smash it in the ground. Right?
Exactly, smash it in the ground. And people are like, oh my gosh, why would you do that? Like Americans, they might not understand. They're like, no, it's sustainable. Like, don't wash the dish. It's from the ground and we use it and it goes back to the ground.
Right. It's like maybe 20 cents, it's drink it and smash it. And then if I have a whiff of this barley tea and like, oh, think of home, because that's what I used to drink. And, same with the green tea, it remind me of China. And it's very interesting. I haven't really thought too much about tea being an important part of, travelings or something like that. But I think it became that way, but I just haven't really realized it,
Yeah. So, Juno, thank you so much for being our guest and sharing like a little bit of, because you've traveled a lot of places. Beautiful, beautiful pictures. So, where else can our guests and our listeners find out more about you, where you're going, your travels, and what you do? Where else can they find out more about you?
Thanks, Jenny. So you can find me in Runaway Juno on Instagram, and also same in the website. So runawayjuno.com. And I'm on Twitter, Facebook. So you can find me pretty easily. When you come to my website, you can also sign up to the newsletter. So you can see some updates. And if you are interested in seeing if you're in Alaska tourism or, tourism industry, I also do a lot of different type of promotions about destination through my consulting company. It's called Ovivos Consulting. Actually, this is pretty cool. This is a shout out to your fellow business owners in Fairbanks. So this is made by the Woodball company.
Awesome.
So they custom made this for me. Another great business in Fairbanks. So that's my company name. So you can find me there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And like she said, find her online. Check out her Instagram, her websites, and her photographs are beautiful, and so are her stories. And we can't wait to see, where your adventures lead you. And thank you so much for being part of our personal journey by sharing your personal experiences.
Thanks, Jenny, and thank you for the community. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Essence of Tea podcast. We would really appreciate it if you could write us a rating and review anywhere where you listen to podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Stitcher.com. You can find us everywhere that you can listen to podcasts, and you can watch live episodes of our podcast on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions at all or any special topics you want us to cover, please let us know at hello@sippingstreams.com.